Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of November 28th. And my next guest is someone I go way back with. It was probably 1966 when I met this young fellow at the Students for a Democratic Society office in Los Angeles. He was active there, and then he moved on to become the National Secretary of SDS. He's done a lot of things since, and he is the host and the main man on Hitting Left with Mike Klonsky on Lumpen Radio, which Live from the Heartland is also on, too. Okay.
You're supposed to say Lumpen Radio.
Lumpen Radio.
There you go.
Okay, Mike. Well, I called you because I've been thinking a lot about Venezuela and, the Trump administration kind of cranking up, hostile activities with carriers off the coast and killing fishermen, as well as probably some drug traffickers. Who knows? But why don't we talk a little bit about Venezuela? You could start off, maybe tell us who is there, what's going on, and what the U.S. seems to be trying to do.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that's there is the U.S. carrier fleet down in the Caribbean. I was listening to U.S. Representative Salazar this morning on Fox. She's a Florida congresswoman. And she basically admitted that this morning that the U.S. is after Venezuela's oil. I'll give you an exact quote. She says, Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day, generating over $1 trillion in economic activities. We're going to be doing a favor for our economy and for our oil companies. That was an unsolicited confession right there by MAGA congresswoman. It's kind of interesting. The U.S. moved their whole carrier fleet from the Asian Pacific, where it was, I guess it was there to contain China or prepare for war with China. But I think they decided China was too tough a piece of meat. And so they moved the whole fleet down to the Caribbean and now are threatening to invade or to intervene militarily somehow in Venezuela, and they're using this weird excuse or weird rationale. They're saying Maduro, the president of Venezuela, is the head of this narcotics ring called
Cartel de los Soles. They say
yes, which doesn't really exist.
No, I pulled a quote from the New York Times, I believe it was, and what is her name now? Michelle Goldberg.
Yes.
And she said, the United States formally designated Maduro, Venezuela, and its allies and government as members of a foreign terrorist organization called Cartel de los Soles, a group that doesn't exist. It is at once a threat and a rationale for a possible regime change operation, a military adventure that would be utterly preposterous, but also looks increasingly likely.
Yes, well, this harkens back to their to Antifa here, where they create this mythical organization like it's some highly structured organization and put it on the terrorist watch list and say that that's the number one threat to the United States internally right now. So here they've created a group in Venezuela, a mythical group. Well, it's actually the name of that they use, for the whole narcotics trade, but it's not an organization. But they've said Maduro's the head of it, and that's why they're going to invade, and push for regime change in Venezuela. The other interesting thing about that is I was reading the Telegraph, which is a British journal, who says that speculates that Cuba could be the real target of this attack, because Venezuela is seen as a lifeline to Cuba. And so anyway, moving the carrier fleet from the Asia Pacific to the Caribbean, it indicates maybe a major change in imperialist strategy. It reminds me of when they shifted from the Middle East, their strategy from the Middle East. They did what they call the pivot to the east when they pulled out of Afghanistan. And they shifted the whole focus of military operations to China. And so they had this big carrier fleet sitting off, somewhere near China. But that carrier is just a sitting duck out there, really, for a drone attack or missile attack. Anyway, the move to focus on Venezuela and the Caribbean, it's kind of like, a redux of Manifest Destiny, and kind of protecting your own backyard against China, Russia, Iran's penetration economically.
Well, the U.S. has a rough history in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, Manifest Destiny was we could basically do what we want to enhance our own interests. I saw a list of things that somewhere it said the U.S. hopes to ramp up pressure on the Maduro government. Covert operations expected to be the first step, sources say. U.S. options include overthrowing Maduro. Human rights groups condemn the U.S. strikes as illegal extrajudicial killing. And there's been pushback not only from European countries, but also from the U.S. Senate a little bit.
Yeah, of course. This whole move has split, not only split the Senate and Congress, but even the MAGAs are upset about it. Half of them are saying, no, we have to keep our focus on China. China is the main threat. China is the main enemy. And the other half are kind of isolationists. They say, no, we've got to retreat back and protect our own interests here in our backyard. So that's where the Manifest Destiny comes in. It's interesting, in an interesting comment, Tulsi Gabbard, Tulsi, who's the director of national intelligence, which is kind of an oxymoron. But Tulsi said the other day that regime change was a thing of the past and that the strategy had ended with Trump's presidency. In other words, Trump is no longer about regime change, which I thought was kind of funny at the same time that they were trying to overthrow Maduro down in Venezuela.
Well, they've got this, Maduro is not the same as Chavez, the guy who preceded him. And there's, I'm not sure if it was a stolen election or not, but the woman who he defeated in the last election in the U.S. claims won the election, and she won the Nobel Peace Prize. So it seems to me there's like a kind of like a buildup of, legitimizing the U.S. attacks on Venezuela.
Exactly. Can you imagine giving the Peace Prize to someone who is calling for an invasion of her own country and the bombing of her own citizens? That's wild. That's just wild. Anyway, certainly the point here is that Tulsi was lying. The U.S. hasn't changed its stripes. Imperialism is all about regime change, and it's trying to put a lipstick on a pig, as they say, trying to make Trump seem like the peace president, and they gave the Peace Prize to his proxy down in Venezuela, who is now cheering on the potential U.S. invasion of her own country.
We just had this No Kings events all around our country. It was a formidable response to the fascist authoritarian activity of the current president and his regime. And I'm just thinking, what do you think if we actually went into Venezuela would be the response? People are kind of geared up anti-Trump these days. But I'm not sure a lot of people know a lot about Venezuela's current history or past history. What you sense might be the response of the masses here in the United States?
Well, I have no idea what. I know already, just from the polling, that the great majority of people here are opposed to war with Venezuela, but I don't know. I don't know about how how fast it would take for a resistance movement to build around that. You remember during the Vietnam War, Michael, and you were a big part of the anti-war activism then. How long it took before there was, the kind of movement. Actually, our group, SDS, we organized the first national anti-war march in Washington in '65. But until it became until really into the '70s, I say '68, there wasn't that kind of shift.
No, I know, Mike. There was people were pretty much for the war until the end of the war, when all of a sudden 70% were opposed to the war. But then, of course, when we went into Iraq, they forgot that and went back to rooting for bombing Iraq for a while.
But you brought up an interesting point. We had like 250,000 people out in the No Kings rally here in Chicago, and I think 7 million nationally. So it shows that public sentiment is shifting, that the tables are turning on Trump. Trump is losing. His numbers are going down the toilet very fast. And but the question is, who's going to lead this movement? Not only around opposition to war, but in the upcoming elections in 26 and 28, because the problem has been that as low as Trump's numbers are, or as high as his disapproval numbers are, the Democratic Party's numbers are even worse. And so I'm encouraged, I'm sure you are too, by the victories of, progressive like Mamdani and other Democrats in the last few weeks in the election. And I thought it was interesting that Mamdani's meeting with Trump was interesting, but we should get to that in a minute. But I think before you can have a real solid anti-imperialist, anti-war movement here, there's got to be some changes in the leadership of the Democratic Party. And otherwise, you have this kind of amorphous movement like the march, the No Kings March. It was great. I mean, I love the No Kings March, but they weren't able to pick out a singular focus for the march, because focusing on one thing or another, whether it was the Palestinian movement or ICE or anything like that, would have divided the march and made it much smaller. So we're kind of operating on two levels here. One is building up independently the left, hitting left, we call it, but that's our independent work. But also we have to still keep together that big coalition that turned out 7 million people in the streets last month.
Well, one of the things we're going to have talked about on this show in the weeks to come will be younger people challenging incumbent Democrats who are maybe pro-Israel. I mean, there's a lot of challenges coming up to the New York congressional delegation, but more on that later. You know what I'd like to do now, Mike, is maybe say a word on Mamdani's victory, but I want to talk about ICE and ICE here in Chicago, because you had some close-up experiences. Well,
yeah, I've had some close-up experiences, as many of us have, because what ICE did, and maybe helped us, was attacking, while its main focus is on the working class and communities like Little Village, which has the highest concentration of Mexicans in the city. They made the mistake of sending their thugs into North Side upscale neighborhoods.
And they did, in Evanston too.
in Evanston too, and the response has been terrific. I mean, my daughter was involved. One of my daughters, I can't keep track of all of them, was involved in a meeting they held when ICE kind of went up to your neighborhood.
Yeah, they did. They were 2 blocks away up here, and
and into my daughter's neighborhood. In Lincoln Square neighborhood, and with about 2 or 3 hours notice, hundreds of people from the community turned out for a training session. And these training sessions have been going on all over the place, where they're informing people how to, to handing out whistles and cards that tell people their rights. Yeah, you can blow your whistle, and I got mine too. And so the response here has been incredible. But the thing that I was just kind of worried about was that the response here has been so good. And, our city has got such a great history of revolt and insurrection and labor organizing, going back to the 19th century, really. That the Tribune ran a piece the other day, a front page story, calling Chicago the model of resistance. And I always worry about that when we're the model. I think every city now, Charlotte, New Orleans, they all have their own history and their own tradition of struggle, and they're all going to find their own whistle, their own symbols of resistance. Yeah,
that's true. But Chicago really got a lot of press this past week. NPR had a show about Chicago resistance, and members of Protect Rogers Park are down in North Carolina doing training sessions with people in Charlotte. I think there were 24,000 students marching in the street in Charlotte. You don't hear all this on our big time news.
Right. So maybe Charlotte's
the Heartland and hitting left with Klonsky will tell you the truth.
Yeah, maybe Charlotte's the model. Who knows? Or maybe this isn't about models; it's about solidarity.
I think a key thing is that for us who are always about recruiting more people to be organizers and take the step into the movement and do good in the world, is that this period in time is going to produce a whole lot of young people coming into the movement. That's my sense.
And hopefully will help us win Congress back in next year. The one thing interesting, I know you don't want to get back to Mamdani right now, but
no, go ahead. I love him.
Mamdani met with Trump the other day, as you saw, and Trump kind of bent a knee to Mamdani and praised him to the skies. And this is after months of calling him a communist, terrorist, whatever, and said that, after months of threatening to withhold federal funds from New York and to kind of turn New York into an economic desert. And now he changed his tune completely and said, he loves New York and he's going to support Mamdani's efforts. Well, what that did, Michael, is it blew apart the whole MAGA strategy for 26, because their plan was to have every Republican candidate attack their opponent as a acolyte of Mamdani. And now they can't do that anymore, because now if you're a friend of Mamdani, your election is almost ensured.
Well, you know what? Michelle Wu, who is the mayor of Boston, she basically was a little critical. She didn't use Mamdani's name. She said, "I'm not interested in a bromance with the federal regime. Flattery is not the way." So I don't know. She didn't mention Mamdani by name, but she did take a stand against it. She's not going to have any appeasement meeting with Trump.
I think that's ridiculous. I think, negotiating support for your city and focusing on the affordability of your city and meeting with Trump or whoever to ensure federal funding goes into your city is not a bromance and it's not appeasement. It's absolutely necessary for every city, including Chicago's, because no matter how much you dislike Trump or his authoritarian or fascist approach, he still controls how the budget is spent, especially with Congress being, right now his little puppet organization. So I think Mamdani's showed the way for other mayors. He didn't let up on his criticism of Trump, and he didn't compromise one thing, but he forced Trump in a way to recognize his popularity and his, and the strength of the movement behind him, which everybody has to do now. Everybody has to do that, including the Democratic leadership.
No, I hear you.
Yeah. So I would, if Wu said that, I think she's coming off the wall, and maybe she feels she has to do that, But I think Wu herself is going to have to woo Trump in a way if Boston is going to come through with this and not woo him, but negotiate. Just you negotiate with your enemies, Michael. We all learned that during the.
Oh, you have to.
The war.
We're running out of time, Mike. It's been great. I just want to say that we are living in the greatest city in the world, and one thing about ICE kind of retreating a little bit here is it's not over, and we just have to remember, as Laura Underwood pointed out in her visit to Broadview, she's a congresswoman, that ICE is coming back in the spring, and we're going to have to keep dealing with them. So everybody get ready. Make sure you got your whistles. They're everywhere.
Bring it on, Michael. And everybody can follow my political scribblings at substack.com. And thanks for having me on the show.
And I'll see you soon, brother. Happy Thanksgiving weekend.
And you too.
Everybody else, stay tuned.